this point in this program, I'd like to hand over the microphone to my colleague, Matthew Monforton.
Well, thank you very much, Lawrence. Lawrence has given everyone sort of a view from 30,000 feet. I'm going to try to give a short view from a little bit lower altitude as to what exactly went on in the legislature this session, as to how we got to where we are. Before I do that, I want to mention the fact that I did something today that I haven't done in several years. I drove past my alma mater, Flathead High School. And a lot has changed since the last time I've seen it. I do have a question, though. It's probably one I shouldn't ask, but I will anyway. Is it still Flathead High School Braves?
Yeah.
We're still the Braves?
Barely.
Yeah, who knows how long? Who knows how much longer that's going to last? But anyway, I have a feeling that in a few years from now, I'm going to drive past Flathead High School again. It's not going to be the Flathead High School Braves. It's going to be the Flathead High School Fighting Social Workers, or the Flathead High School Kind and Gentle Eunuchs, or something outrageous like that. It's liberalism run amok, political correctness run amok. The problem is it's not limited to the names of our mascots. Liberalism run amok is taking away things from us that are far more important, as Larry's details or discussed in detail in the last few moments, things that are much more important than mascots. They're taking away our rights, they're taking away our culture, they're taking away our way of life. I want to talk specifically obviously about the CSKT Water Compact, SB 262, because in my humble opinion, SB 262 was the greatest catastrophe that took place in the legislature this session, by far. Yep. It was a sham. Yep. And I know that's a strong word, so let me spend a few moments with you and tell you why I think why I look at it that way. There were a number of, I'll just say it, a number of what I think are corrupt things that took place in the enactment of SB 262. Let me first talk about the way it was presented to the folks in eastern Montana, the folks east of the Continental Divide. This has a special personal touch for me, a special personal importance, because my district is House District 69, which is the northern third of Gallatin County. Manhattan, Churchill, everything north of Belgrade, that whole area, there are a lot of irrigators in my district. I got a lot of calls from my constituents, from irrigators telling me, you gotta vote yes on the compact, because if you don't, the tribe is going to file claims on our water rights. They're going to make us litigate for years. They're going to make us spend thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. The problem is, once I started reading the compact and reading the Hellgate Treaty, one of the first things I figured out is that the Hellgate Treaty, from which all of this is based, doesn't apply to any lands east of the Continental Divide. So I thought to myself, why is it that the tribes have been threatening for years to file claims anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 to 10,000, depending upon what their latest threat was? Why were they threatening to file all these claims not only west of the divide, but on water rights east of the divide? What legal basis did they have for saying that? And I asked John Carter, who is one of the attorneys for the tribes, during one of our House Judiciary meetings. I said, Mr. Carter, it doesn't appear that the Hellgate Treaty applies east of the Continental Divide. By what basis does the tribe claim to have legal rights to water rights east of the divide? Because your treaty only applies west of the divide. And he said, well, that's true, but the CSKT has aboriginal rights east of the Continental Divide. And it's on the basis of those aboriginal rights, which are recognized in federal common law, that we can file these claims. The problem with that argument, and unfortunately I hadn't had a chance to research the law when he said that, but what I researched the law afterwards, and it turns out there's a Ninth Circuit opinion that was issued in 2012 that says, and it was out of Alaska. And what it says is that if a tribe wants to exercise Aboriginal rights, it has to first show that the tribe at some point controlled that area of land. Controlled it, not just simply walked around or hunted there once in a while, but actually controlled it for a long period of time. The problem with that ruling, which the tribal lawyers, nor any other lawyers would mention to us, is that the CSKT has never controlled lands east of the Continental Divide. And we know that because their own expert witness has written that for decades. And it's not only him, but it's every other historian that has studied the CSKT. Some of them will acknowledge that they've gone hunting at times east of the Divide. They've been at war at times with the Blackfeet east of the Divide, but they have never controlled any lands east of the Divide. And they knew that. But in order to exercise Aboriginal rights, they have to have shown that they controlled lands east of the Divide. They can't show that, and they know it. And they perpetrated this lie over and over and over again, that the people east of the Divide need to get on board with the compact, because if they don't, we're going to file claims against your water rights, and we're going to litigate against you for years. It was based on a lie. And I'm especially angry about it because it was a lie that was sold to so many of my constituents. And to this day, they still believe that. And they still believe that I betrayed them by voting no on this compact. So it's something that I feel passionately about and that I want to do something about. And that's,
Thank you.
and I don't know how long it's going to take to be able to get people to see that. Get people to understand the lies that they've been fed, because to them this is their water rights. And when I'm talking about my constituents, I'm talking about people east of the Divide. They're scared about litigation, and I don't blame them a bit. The problem is no one has been able to tell them the truth. No one has been able to tell them what the law is and what the tribes and their allies have been doing in terms of lying to them over and over again. Because the problem is Governor Bullock and his administration have been echoing those lies. Attorney General Tim Fox and his people have been echoing those lies over and over and over again.
Yep.
Not only do we have what I'll say are the corrupt measures that were used to persuade through fear and lies the people east of the Divide, but we've learned recently about the kinds of dark money shills that the tribes have relied on to sell the compact. One of the biggest ones is an organization called FARM, Farmers and Ranchers for Montana. I suspect many of you in the room have heard of that organization. Many of the constituents in my district have heard of that organization because they hit the airwaves, they sent out mailings, they were all over the place in terms of advertising for the compact. And FARM presented itself as a group of farmers and ranchers and Montanans from all over who were coming together for the good of Montana to pass the compact. Well, what we've since learned, to no one's surprise, is that FARM was financed by tribal money. And none of the people who were fronting for FARM acknowledged that. They were financed, we think, almost entirely by tribal money. And we're going to find out more about that as we go on. As we go along to find out exactly how much of their funding was from the tribes.
Doesn't that mean our money then? Because it's our money that goes to the tribe.
Yeah, it's ultimately our money. But at least if we had known in advance that this was a tribal shill, that would have taken some of the wind out of their sails. And it was something that should have been reported in their lobbying disclosures, and were not. I think the biggest problem with the compact, though, is the whole idea of the compact itself. One of the things that we heard repeatedly is what a great thing Montana has done by having a compact system, because most other states deal with tribal water rights through litigation. And well, we don't want litigation, we don't want lawyers, we don't want judges. We want to come together as Montanans and negotiate this. And it sounds like a good idea. Let's get rid of lawyers, let's get rid of judges. In most cases, that really is a good idea.
Get rid of the governor.
The problem is the negotiations took place between a Democratic governor and a pro-democratic tribe. Because the Native American tribes are the most pro-democratic organizations in Montana. So there was really no negotiating taking place. It was two parties essentially agreed on the fact that the tribe should have as much rights, as much resources as possible at your expense. Because it wasn't any skin off of their noses.
Think back about the consensus-based preventive justice of Europe. There's no disagreement. They're all after the same end. Didn't that happen here?
That's exactly what happened. It was a consensus. It was not two parties with different sets of interests negotiating. And most importantly, there was no one at that table representing you folks. So as horrible as it is to have judges and lawyers that are inevitably involved in court cases, you at least have every party at the table. Every party is in the courtroom, every party is represented by lawyers, all the facts are hashed out, and a final decision is made by a judge who is not a political hack. That's the way it's done in almost every other state except Montana. Instead, we have this compact theory, and that's how we decide water rights, and that's the underlying problem. It's the same kind of problem that exists when you have Democratic elected officials negotiating with public employees unions. Neither side of those parties has any incentive really to keep the costs down. You have the public employees union that of course wants to increase their wages and benefits, naturally. But on the other side of the table, you have a Democratic governor or Democratic mayor, depending on who it is, who also wants to jack up wages and benefits because those people are going to vote for the Democratic Party. So you don't have any real negotiations taking place. And it's the same thing that happened in the compact. Arguably, you could say the same thing happened with the recent Iran treaty that has been negotiated. On the one side, you have a party that hates Israel, hates America, hates American values, and then on the other side, you have the Iranians, who also hate Israel, who also hate America and American values. You didn't have any real negotiation take place, and that's exactly the reason why we have the kind of horrible treaty that we have with Iran, which will hopefully, we'll see what happens, which will hopefully get shut down by Congress. So what we have is, with this compact, is we have a situation where a Democratic governor has created what amounts to a giant dark money ATM for the Democratic Party. Because that's exactly what all of these resources being given to the tribe will end up being, is a dark money ATM that will go back and help Democratic candidates and help liberal Republican candidates. How do I know this is going to happen? Because it already has happened. As probably every one of you know, about a year ago or a year and a half ago, Senator Tudvitt showed up in front of a hearing of the CSKT. And he went through very meticulously how they were going to get the compact passed through the legislature. And what he promised essentially is what happened. And that same day, the CSKT tribe donated $20,000 to a dark money group. Was it 22? 22,000 to a dark money group affiliated with Tudvitt. That money was then spent in Republican primaries to try to defeat conservative Republican candidates. I know this because I was one of them. And so I have a personal interest in this. Because what happened on a small scale last year will happen on a much grander scale if this is allowed to continue. So we need to ask ourselves, how did we get to this point? Who's to blame for this? Let me start by talking about who's not to blame for this. Who's not to blame for this is the Democratic Party. And that may sound kind of counterintuitive. I don't blame the Democrats. I don't blame the Democratic Party for this. I just learned something very interesting today. Do you know who the front runner is in the Democratic presidential primaries right now? Or not primaries? I was about to try to give you a hint that no, it's not Hillary Clinton, but you folks are already a step ahead of me. It's Bernie Sanders, a socialist, an openly avowed socialist. To his credit, that's how he describes himself. So we have a socialist who knows if he's going to be able to actually win the nomination. I have a feeling he's probably going to get tapped out at some point, but he is ahead right now. His campaign fits seamlessly within the modern Democratic Party. So it raises an interesting question of how much difference there is between the socialists and the modern Democratic Party. I suspect the answer now is not a whole lot. So anyone that voted for a Democrat last year pretty much knew or should have known what they were getting, because Democrats are going to support the kinds of things that Larry talked about. They have this socialist European state of mind as far as how things should be addressed. So I don't blame the Democrats. The Democratic voters got exactly what they wanted. I heard from a lot of people that this is an example of how the government is broken. We should blame the government. We should blame the state. The system's broken. I have to disagree with that too. If you're a Democrat or a liberal or a socialist, not a whole lot of difference between the three, but if you're one of those folks, the government is not broken. The government is functioning quite effectively in creating the kind of world that you want to live in. And this is a point that columnist Mark Stein made a few weeks ago, and I think it's brilliant. If you're a liberal, government is not broken. It's giving you the kind of world that you want to live in. So we can't blame the Democrats, and we can't blame the government. Who should we blame?
The people.
Us.
The people, to some extent, but the people last year in Montana sent 59 Republicans out of 100 to the House. They sent 29 Republican senators out of 50 to the Senate. The voters largely did their job. They voted Republican, presumably because they believe in property rights, they believe in religious liberty, they believe in the Constitution. That's what they voted for, but they didn't get that. That's the problem. It's not that the Democratic Party is doing something different or something that it shouldn't be doing. They're doing exactly what they promised. And they're getting the government to behave exactly the way they want. The problem is the Republican Party is broken. That's the problem we need to fix, because there's no accountability in the Republican Party, unfortunately. And I hate to say that, but it needs to be said. 59 out of 100 members of the Montana House were Republicans, and we couldn't control the floor. That's the problem. And that's a problem that has to be changed. But the bottom line is the CSK Treaty is our mess as Republicans. And as Republicans, it's our responsibility to fix it. Now that brings up the point, how do we fix this problem? What are we to do at this point? And I want to be completely honest with everyone. In my opinion, I don't think there's any silver bullet in the courts that will allow us to get the compact struck down in the courts. There's a lot of my colleagues that disagree. There are other lawyers in the state that disagree. One of the big issues that's being promulgated is the fact that the compact was not passed by 2/3 majority of the legislature, because that's what you need to have the kind of immunity provisions that are in the compact to be constitutional. It's late in the evening. I'm not going to get into the legal weeds on that. I think that's problematic as a legal argument. A bigger problem is that kind of argument, or any argument based on the Montana Constitution, has to ultimately be brought to the Montana Supreme Court. They're not going to rule in your favor. They are not your friends. Certainly not on some issue like this. Now, there may be some peripheral type cases that we can bring to help expose the corruption that took place. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping to do. But in terms of at least right now, from what we know, in terms of a lawsuit that will actually bring down the whole compact, that probably isn't going to happen. At least not based on the information we have available to us at this time. So what should we do? We should hold Republicans accountable. And two of them come to mind in particular. One of them is Attorney General Fox, who has strongly supported this compact for months and months. Another person, perhaps even a more important one, is Congressman Zinke. There's plenty of others. Those are the two that come to the top of my list right now, as far as people that we need to hold accountable. Congressman Zinke in particular, because the Republicans control Congress. Congressman Zinke could walk into the Speaker's office and tell Speaker Boehner, look, the compact is bad news for my state. Please, please, Mr. Speaker, don't let it come to a floor vote. Let it die in committee, whatever. There's 100 different ways you can make things disappear if you're the Speaker and you actually control your members as opposed to Montana, which they do. Yeah, Speaker Boehner is not exactly a hero of mine, but one thing I will give him credit for is he controls that floor. Same thing with Mitch McConnell in the Senate. He controls the floor of the Senate. And if Congressman Zinke were to approach Boehner and ask him to do that, he would get it done. Because Speaker Boehner doesn't care about the CSKT Compact. He could care less. But if one of his members needs something, he'll do that for his member because it only concerns Montana. So Congressman Zinke has the power, literally by himself, to shut this thing down. The question is, will he do that? Will Attorney General Fox turn around and acknowledge the problems with this compact and change his opinion? That's problematic. Both of these so-called Republicans, and I use that term loosely, commitment to property rights, to the Constitution, is questionable at best, and that's putting it charitably. And both of these men have supported the compact. Obviously, Attorney General Fox has for many, many months. Congressman Zinke actually went to the CSKT in December and told them he was going to support the compact as well. So these two gentlemen have a lot in common. These two gentlemen also have something else in common. Take a guess as to what that might be. Well, they definitely want money for their next election. Both of them are up for re-election next year. That's the focal point, is to be able to get them to focus on the idea that if the compact goes through, they're not going to get re-elected. That's the message that we need to send to these gentlemen, is that if the compact goes through, they are going to be replaced. It's that simple. That's the simplest and probably the only way that we're ultimately going to be able to stop this compact. This whole struggle against the compact is not simply a struggle against flesh and blood. It's a struggle against principalities. And while there are people who are sincere proponents of the compact, who believe in the compact and believe sincerely that it is in the best interests of the state, there are many, many people who are trying to impose the compact on us because they hate your farms, they hate your freedom, they hate your firearms, and they hate your faith. And this compact is just one of many examples in this state and throughout the nation of how they are trying to suppress people like you. And we need to stand up together, brothers and sisters, and defend everyone's constitutional rights. And those of us who live outside of the Flathead have a special obligation to convince everyone else in Montana that your problems are our problems. Your struggles are our struggles. Your rights are our rights. And your victory will be our victory. So thank you very much for having me and listening to me. Be honored to take any questions. Thank you.